Hello everyone! Over the last 2 decades, this dish has been gaining steady popularity all around the world. It turned from an unknown food to a solid favorite to many people. Today, I'm giving you the ultimate hummus making guide, so please stay tuned. This dish originated in Arabia a long time ago. We don't know exactly where in Arabia or when, but most probably in the Levant. As in Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, this dish is a staple item. You can have hummus for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's considered a type of fast food and also a main item in fine dining. In the last few decades, and due to the migration of many Levantine people to Western countries, hummus have been gaining a strong foothold in many kitchens. Also, the rise of veganism turned this dish from a simple trend in the 90s and the 2000s to a stable item for vegans in the decades to follow. So, what is hummus? Hummus means chickpeas in Arabic, which might go against the misconception that many people have that hummus means dip, cream, or paste. That explains why we have multiple irrelevant variations of the dish in Western countries like chocolate hummus, spinach hummus, beans hummus. Hummus simply means chickpeas, so if it's not made of chickpeas, it's simply not hummus. So what are the common problems with hummus? 1. Hummus can be too thick. 2. Hummus can be too lumpy or inconsistent. 3. Hummus can be brownish or yellowish, not so appetizing in appearance. 4. Hummus can be either tasteless or tasting too strong. In today's video, we're going to learn how to avoid all these undesirable outcomes by going through the process step by step. Now let's talk about the ingredients. First ingredient, chickpeas. You can get them either dried or canned. In the case of dried chickpeas, you have to put them in water, leave them to soak overnight, or for 8 hours at least. In the case of canned ones, you wouldn't need to do that because they're already softened by the preservative liquid. Second ingredient, tahini, which is sesame paste. You can get it from any supermarket now, but I prefer to get the ones in Arab shops because they're really matching the consistency and the flavor of the authentic hummus. Third ingredient, salt, but you gotta be careful with that, and I'm gonna tell you why later. 4. Citric acid, not too much though. 6. Ice cubes. 7. Baking soda, and I'll tell you why later. 8. A very good blender or a food processor. 9. A fridge. Now, let's go through the steps. As I mentioned earlier, we can either use dried chickpeas or canned chickpeas. In the case of using dried chickpeas, make sure you leave them in water for at least 8 hours before boiling them for an hour and a half. When we put them to boil for an hour and a half, make sure you add a little spoon or a teaspoon of baking soda. The job of baking soda at this point is to soften the wall, the cells of the chickpeas. That will make us get the creamy and soft hummus that you get in professional restaurants in the Levant. The baking soda makes the water alkaline, which in turn makes the plant cell walls more soluble in water, and that's what makes it softer. After leaving it to boil for an hour and a half, make sure you take it while it's really hot and still steaming, and take out all the liquid that it was boiled with. Make sure you don't lose that water, never get rid of it. After taking this water aside, put it in a container and keep it, because this is how we're going to control the degree of softness of the hummus while preparing it. After separating the liquid from the chickpeas, make sure you add it to the blender as soon as possible. It has to be steaming hot at this point. Once the chickpeas are in the blender, run it for a few seconds until it gets a little bit soft. Once you realize that it had completely dissolved, start adding the water that we've left outside a bit by bit. Be careful with this step, as we don't want it to get too runny. We're still going to add other liquid ingredients, so you got to be very careful with that. The thickness desired at this stage should be a little bit thicker than the final result we want our hummus to be like. So be very careful and keep checking with a spoon how thick it is. Don't panic. If it's too thick, add a little bit of water, and when you feel it's getting too runny, just stop there. After blending the chickpeas to a reasonable consistency, we will let it to cool completely. We will put it in the fridge after that, but if we put it in the fridge while it's hot, it might get crystallized. And that happened with me personally, and it ruined the whole thing. So be patient, wait for it until it's entirely cool, not lukewarm, but really cool, before putting it in the fridge. After making sure that the chickpeas paste have got cool enough, at this point you can put it in the fridge. Leave it for an hour or two until it gets really cold. Now we're gonna start with the final step. So at this step, we're gonna add all the ingredients all together, and we gotta be very careful because we don't wanna put too much of anything that would imbalance the whole mix. You gotta be aware of something. A lot of hummus making attempts fail because people put too much tahini or too little tahini, too much chickpeas or too little chickpeas. The same can happen with the salt or with the liquidity of the entire mix. So be very careful that what we're trying to do now is to equalize everything and balance everything until we reach the desired flavor. So now this is very important. The percentage of tahini needed for chickpeas is around 20 to 30% of the amount of chickpeas. Since we use 240 grams of chickpeas, we need 60 to 70 grams of tahini. A very helpful trick is that we always start with the 20% and then we can add if we need more. So start with 60 grams and leave the rest outside in case you want to add that later. After you've added the tahini, you can add 3 large ice cubes. The role of the ice cubes is to give it the creaminess and the softness, and it also whitens the color to give it this professional color that you get in restaurants. After adding the ice cubes, we're gonna add the salt and the citric acid. So since this is a very critical step, because it might ruin the entire dish, we're gonna add 1/3 of a teaspoon of citric acid and half a spoon of salt. After that, we're gonna start blending the entire thing for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then make sure that with the spoon that we get all what's in the bottom on the top, and keep doing that to make sure that all the ingredients have filled the entire space of the blender. So now, this is the most critical part. After blending everything together for about 30 seconds to 1 minute, we have to taste what we've made. And gradually we're gonna increase or balance the taste according to what we're gonna find out. The taste of the citric acid might not appear at first. This is where the lemon juice is gonna come to play. We're gonna have a little squeeze of lemon juice, which is gonna pop up the citric acid. The idea of using citric acid and lemon juice is to give these two different citrus flavors to the hummus. So one would be a little bit punchy, you're gonna feel it in your tongue, in the tip of your tongue, and the other one is gonna have an ambient lemony taste. I tried that multiple times and it always worked, but you gotta be careful with it because too much lemon or citric acid can destroy the entire dish. Once you feel that the flavor is going into the right direction, you should run the blender for as long as you can, 5 to 15 minutes if you want. That's why it's good to have a kitchen machine, better than a blender, because it can really operate for several minutes without overheating. The reason why professional hummus is so soft and creamy is because of using the ice and blending it for several minutes. Don't be cheap with that. Don't run it for 1-2 minutes. You gotta keep trying until it reaches the perfect consistency you're looking for. This dish has multiple variations, so it's not only served by itself. Sometimes people add olive oil, sometimes they add ghee. One of the favorite ones of mine is the one with the lamb meat and pomegranates. Don't eat it with carrots or cucumbers. This is eaten with pita bread, which I'm gonna cover in a following video. So please subscribe, and thank you very much for watching this, and I hope I bring you better recipes every time.